evening. It's 6:30, or actually technically 6:29, but close enough. It'll be 6:30 within the next 5 to 10 seconds. We call this to order a regular City Council meeting for September 7th, 2021. We'll start off with the invocation and pledge allegiance with Councilmember Smith.
Good evening. Let us pray. Oh, Heavenly Father, I just thank you for allowing us to see another day, allowing us to come through another weekend of celebration, another weekend of just enjoying each other, being out for a Labor Day holiday, Father God. Just continue to watch over those who are impacted by the COVID virus, oh Father God. Uplift them, those who have been touched, those who have lost loved ones, those who are going through illness right now. Continue to watch over our community. Pray that we do well and that we can actually have a good meeting tonight as we conduct our business. Just continue to watch over our families. Continue to just give us strength as we continue through this day. I ask for these blessings in your name I pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. We appreciate it. Our next order of business is the proclamation for Nami, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. I will read this proclamation. It's for the whole month of September 2021, Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. Whereas every year thousands of individuals die by suicide, leaving behind their friends and family members to navigate the tragedy of loss and feelings of shame and stigma to prevent these suicide loss survivors from talking openly. And whereas suicidal thoughts, much like mental health conditions, can affect anyone regardless of age, gender, or background, and is often the result of untreated mental health condition. And whereas suicidal thoughts, although common, could not be considered normal and often indicate more serious issues. Whereas over half the people diagnosed with a mental health condition have symptoms by age 14 and 75% by age 24. Additionally, 20% of youth are affected by a mental health condition, and suicide is the second leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 24. And whereas National Alliance of Mental Illness, NAMI, is the nation's largest grassroots organization dedicated to providing advocacy, education, support, and public awareness so that all individuals and families affected by mental illness can build better lives. And whereas Break the Stigma is a mental awareness and educational program about signs and symptoms of mental health conditions as well as suicide awareness and prevention for middle, high school, and college students. And whereas September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, a time to share resources and stories in an effort to shed light on this highly taboo topic. Now, therefore, I, Robert Hatfaker, Mayor of the City of Clemson, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2021 to be Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month and encourage citizens to show support by wearing the lime green that you'll see in front of City Hall tonight and other places throughout the city, and to reach out to those affected by suicide, get informed about the warning signs, help raise awareness of programs designed to help, and connect individuals with suicide identification to treat services. And witness whereof, and hereto I set my hand and cause the great seal of the city to be affixed the 7th day of September 2021. And I believe we have someone, Bethany Henry is here from NAMI. Would you like to say something based on the proclamation? We didn't. This is spur of the moment, so if you don't want to speak, we understand, but you are here in support. We appreciate all the efforts that you're doing locally and statewide and nationally. We appreciate it. Did you want to say anything? Last chance. Thank you. All right. And I also know that Pickens County is doing the same thing with the lime green ribbons. If I'm not mistaken, they're supporting it as well throughout for the month of September. So thank you for being here, and we will get you this. Would you like to take a quick picture with City Council?
You can say no.
You can say no, too. I'm just getting turned down left and right, but that's fine. All right, we'll make sure we get you a copy of this. So thank you for being here. All right, the next is public session. We'll do public session before approval minutes. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Smith again.
And I do say thank you as well for the support, because this is a very important issue, suicide prevention, so thank you for that, Robert. It's public session time. If you'd like to come and make a statement or let us know what's on your mind, issues you may be facing in the city or surrounding community, we're happy to hear that today, as long as it's not already on the policy agenda action items. We can actually hear comments from you. So this is your opportunity to come and speak. You have 3 minutes to speak during that time. And for those who are online, you can call in at 653. I lost the number. There we go. 653-9886. If you'd like to come in and call in and make a comment, you're able to do so. Would there be anyone who'd like to make a public comment at this time? Okay. Doesn't seem like we have anyone that's wanting to make a statement, so we'll go ahead and move on, and we will close the public session at this time.
Okay. Thank you again. Appreciate it very much. The next agenda item is approval of minutes for August 16, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. That was unanimous and unopposed. So the next is approval of the minutes for August 20th, 2021. Do I have a motion for those minutes?
So moved.
Second. Second. Thank you. All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Again, unanimous. So no other votes. So thank you very much. Now we'll go to reports and just. Oh, yeah. Sorry. And actually, Bob's going to recognize.
Yeah, I'd like just
Thank you.
real quick to recognize that throughout the semester, and this is the first night that they're here, that members of Dr. Brownlee's policy class are going to be joining us at each of our meetings throughout the semester that are here and from the PRTM department. So we'll have students amongst us who, so if you see the room a little more full than you expect, they're here under duress. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. I'm noticing you're all sitting in the back row. That's okay. That's all right.
I'm always up front.
Oh, there is somebody up front. There you go. I love it. So, all right. So reports. Thank you, Bob. Reports and discussion agenda. The first is to discuss the ordinance requiring that persons or entities desiring water and or sewer service at locations outside the city's corporate boundaries may be provided such service at the city's sole discretion and must submit petition or annexation or execute an annexation covenant to run with the property or both. Todd is, or I'm looking at
take
Andy.
this one full
Okay,
time.
so Andy's gonna, thank you, Andy.
I'm bringing this one before you guys because I think it's something that we need to be up to par with our surrounding municipalities. They all have similar ordinances to this. We're the only ones who do not. Basically what this is, if someone outside the city wanted to have utility service here, they would be required to submit a letter or a petition of annexation if they were contiguous to us. That does not mean that they would be annexed. You guys would get to decide if you wanted to annex them or not. And we would have the letter, so if 10 years down the road you decided to, you could pull the trigger at that time. If it was not a contiguous property, it would be done through a covenant, pretty much with the same arrangement. So when it became contiguous with them, you would have that option.
Any comments? Yes?
Would this apply to, it says entities, so I assume if a company came in and wanted water, it applies no matter what kind of organization?
Anyone or any land outside
Okay.
of the city of otherwise.
I just know some municipalities have a challenge when companies want to come in, and that changes a lot of things about their water supply. Not that I'm seeing that, I'm just asking.
Yeah, and just because they signed it doesn't mean they would.
Okay.
But this is new projects.
This could apply to it. We have some customers now who are outside of the city. I would recommend you not apply this to them, and that it would only be for new requests moving forward.
That was the question, because I mean, there's could be some out there now that might would or would want to.
And if they wanted to, they could. They still have the same ability to be able to come to us and ask to be annexed.
Yeah, that ability now.
I just wouldn't. It would just be. They have such little options if you applied it to them. They wouldn't have the choice where you you can choose where you get your utilities from if you don't want to agree with this, but if you've already got your connection, you're kind of over a barrel there, don't have the same flexibility.
Other comments, questions for Andy?
I'd just like to know if y'all are comfortable with this, and Mary and I can go back and refine it. If you have any comments for it, we can bring it back for you for first reading at your next meeting, or we can send it to other committees for evaluation if you want to get input from anybody else. This is the first time you guys have ever heard about it, so it's not a fast track kind of a thing. It's just something I think we need to have in our.
I think it's important, if y'all remember, I don't remember who was on it, who wasn't, but like Lakeside Live, you know, that is what their agreement with Seneca was, and prevented us from having that opportunity, so I think it's important for us to have that tool.
How many customers do we have currently that are in our water system that are not inside the city limits? Do you have any idea?
Probably have 9,000 total customers. It's less than 100.
Less than 100.
Yeah, not very many.
So if I understand this, Andy, what this really is doing, and John made me think about this, is no one will get water unless they apply for annexation. If we turn them down, they still keep that water, right? That's their option. But no one will be provided water unless they also apply for annexation. They have to do that concurrently.
You can do it for water. You can do it for just sewer and still provide the water.
Okay.
You can do it a lot of different ways, but the state law allows you to include water in the sewer. So if someone who was not in the city and they wanted to develop outside, and let's say they were not contiguous, they would do a covenant that would say, in the future, and you became contiguous, we know that if the city chose to do so, they could annex us. That decision was already made, but it would be a condition of getting the utility.
And that annexation request is in perpetuity if that property is sold to somebody else.
It
or
goes
someone
with
else
the
owns
land.
it, it's always going to be there.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other comments? We'll see it on the agenda for next city council. Thank you, Andy, for bringing it up. The second is to set a date for a work session to discuss the planning commission's recommendations for a new zoning designation. And I believe, Todd, you're going to take the lead on this.
Good evening, all. This might be a little misleading. It may not be necessary to set a work session, but out of an abundance of caution, we wanted to make sure y'all were ready to move forward with this item. If you'll recall that, I think 2-3 council meetings ago, after we had the public hearing on what was then RM1A, that there was some discussion amongst council about maybe the appropriateness of the way it was titled. There were issues with the definition being more accurate, and then Bob, you asked us to look at the possibility of imposing some sort of standards on single-family homes. So we took it back to the Planning Commission, and that the ordinance you have before you, the changes are where it said RM1A, it now says R7. We revised the description to eliminate where before we included discussion about patio homes, and since they had been eliminated, we refined the description to make sure we included that. And that they did feel like that for this particular zoning designation that there were two architectural standards that they recommended be applied, and that was that no identical homes shall be side by side, and that adjacent homes must have different architecture, and they defined that a variation in roofing material or siding material or paint color alone does not constitute a change in, does not fulfill that requirement. So other than that, there were no changes to the ordinance. So basically what you have before you is the same ordinance. They changed the name, refined the definition, and then added these standards for houses in the R7 district. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, and we can host a workshop if you would like, or we can bring this back to the council. The next step would normally be to put it up for a first reading.
Comments, questions?
Did the original from RM1A, did the original other standards remain in that? I can't remember.
Yeah, they were
looking for like no vinyl siding and those kind of things. Are they still in the ordinance?
those standards for patio homes, which are not allowed in R7, but they address those standards. They are still in the ordinance.
Okay.
The ones that you're referring to. They don't apply to R7, but they apply to RM1, 2, 3, and 4, where we do allow the patio home type development.
So that was a yes to the vinyl siding.
It is still in the ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, the only changes was where it said RM1A and now it says R7. We refined that definition of that zoning category, and then the only other change was they added where before under RM1A they did not have any kind of architectural guidelines. They added that statement that no two houses, identical houses, can be side by side. But everything else stayed the same.
But R7, as proposed, could have non-patio homes that would not have those architectural standards and no vinyl siding.
Yeah, those standards do not apply to R7 or R12 or R20.
Further questions, comments? Is everybody okay with putting this on the agenda for September 20th and not having a work session? Just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. I'm seeing head nods, so thank you.
I
Head
think we
nods.
beat it around pretty well.
Okay. All right, so
Getting there.
Todd, it sounds like everybody's comfortable putting it on September 20th agenda. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Brandon, appreciate it. All right, the next is to receive a report from the Friends of the Green Crescent Trail. Chad is going to give this, but before we do that, Bob's going to introduce.
I had asked Chad to give us a presentation and update on what the Green Crescent Trail Group is doing, and so we can keep that on the front of our minds, since that's been a pretty high priority project for citizens, and there are some additional opportunities coming up that we need to keep in the forefront for funding, availability, and grants that are available now through the American Rescue Act. Thank you, Chad.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm going to actually let my fellow board
And
member
Heidi's here as well. So Heidi,
My name is Heidi Williams. I'll be
back to the
Chad
agenda.
Carson's anger interpreter tonight. Actually here to give you a little bit of background, and I'm just going to pitch it over to Chad, who has all of the really exciting news. But thank you all for serving, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. The Friends of the Green Crescent Trail just wanted to take a moment to update the city on the important work that's being done and supported here in our area with regard to creating this multi-purpose system of trailways. We have made some incredible progress working with State House Representative Jerry Carter, who's here with us tonight, and Senator Thomas Alexander. The Friends of the Green Crescent has secured a $200,000 allocation from the South Carolina General Assembly for trail in District 3. So we split that between Clemson and Central. It can be used in both places, and it will help us with shovel-ready projects, which is really important, and that's something that Chad is going to speak to in a few minutes. Central is moving ahead with its $1.4 million Green Crescent Trail Connector project, and when it comes online, it will connect SWU, downtown Central, the rec center, and all of the places that we go already with our families. Clemson Shovel Ready project is the one that's in progress right down the road. That's the Green Crescent Trail Loop and the Phase 1 trail that's connecting Clemson and Gateway Parks with the Berkeley Bridge. This has been funded by a $62,500 allocation from the City of Clemson, along with a $100,000 SCPRT grant and a $10,000 grant from Duke Energy. Both of those were grants that we were happy to help the city write. In total, the City of Clemson has allocated $725,000 to the Green Crescent Trail, and we have secured additional funds from outside sources. All of this will make the construction in Phase 1 in Clemson possible. And hopefully that will be coming online at the beginning of this year, finally. The fact that funds are in place for phase 1 and that the construction will begin soon are very big accomplishments that we have all been working on together for years. Thank you for your contribution to that effort. But we are also here tonight to talk about how to continue the momentum into phase 2 so that this effort, this Green Crescent Trail effort, does not just end with phase 1. That would be a tragedy. There are 2 steps that we believe need to be worked on immediately that will help us get to that phase 2. The first is to fund and design engineering work for phase 2 sections of the Green Crescent Trail, with the goal being bringing them closer to shovel ready. Shovel ready means grant ready. 2 is to allocate the city's portions of funds for the actual construction of these phase 2 sections. We need to begin fundraising for grants and scholarships and sponsorships ASAP. But without matching funds from the city committed first, we find ourselves stuck time and time again. In particular, we have 2 funding opportunities that we're here to shop to you today. The first one is another SCPRT grant for up to $100,000. This grant funding is provided on a cost reimbursement basis, just like the one that Andy's been working with us on for phase 1. The grant recipient pays 100% of the costs of an item before submitting a reimbursement request for 80% of eligible costs. Individual trail grants can range from $10,000 to $100,000. We wrote our grant last time for the maximum of $100,000, and they happily awarded it to us. The second one is even more exciting. This is a federal grant program through the Department of Commerce, and the grant funding ranges between $100,000 and $10 million. This is called the American Rescue Plan Act for Travel, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation. You could have written that for the Green Crescent Trail. These grants will fund between 80 and 100% of a project's cost, up to $10 million. One of our roles as an advocacy group is to seek out these potential grant and funding opportunities. When I attended a webinar for the American Rescue Plan program last month, one of the most important pieces of information that was shared by somebody with a really long title, whose name I can't remember, because I didn't actually include that in my notes. But what he said was, we look for nonprofit organizations that are aligned by and supported by their local governments. We want to make sure that the work being done is endorsed by local governments' plans and visions for the local economy. Endorsed by is more than a letter of support for awards of this size and scale. It is more than the initial work that we've completed by piecing it together with multiple funding sources. It is absolutely necessary to have local funding and engineering in place for these projects to be successfully funded. And that's why we're here tonight, to reiterate the need for further investment by the City of Clemson. We made a request for the 2021-2022 budget cycle to allocate $408,000 per year to be used for the Green Crescent Trail. That was our best estimate for what we felt was needed for the city's portion over the next 10 years to implement the vision that we all want to see for a network of better walking and biking trail connections to our community. The balance would be funded with grants and other fundraising, which is fundraising that we look forward to bringing forward on the city's behalf. So Chad is going to talk to you now about what those next steps look like, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Heidi. And I think there were supposed to be some maps as well, Lowell, that we sent over. But I was just going to say that for those who are new to listening about the Green Crescent Trail, if you're familiar with the Swamp Rabbit Trail, the Doodle Trail, which there's some similarities here. Ours is more like a jigsaw puzzle that you sit around during the summer and try to put together on a table, where some of the other trail systems had one big long rail bed. They were able to fundraise at one time and do it at one time. Just the nature of what we're all trying to do here is putting pieces of puzzle together on a table. And what we're seeing, phase 1 is essentially a corner piece of that puzzle that we're getting out of the box. So Clemson Park and that connection to Gateway Park, connection to Clemson Elementary, that's that corner piece. But we want to continue adding pieces to it, which is why we want to talk about phase 2. We feel like the momentum, we all know how long the lag times are on these, and so we feel like if we start now, as phase 1 comes online next year, we'll be prepared to not miss out on some of these funding opportunities and be able to continue the process. So that's really what this is all about. And phase 2 in particular, as we look at those puzzle pieces, we have that corner piece in Clemson Park, but we would like to connect other nearby puzzle pieces like Ashley Deering Park down Berkeley Drive and the Clemson African American Museum and the Arts Center right across from Gateway Park and up the hill. And even continuing on to Nettles Park from Ashley Deering Park. So the idea of phase 2 is to make what we're going to build and invest in phase 1 even more usable and extend that and just to add to an already good thing. So that's really the idea, and we've included some maps here. Hopefully y'all can get emails of those as well. These are things that the Clemson staff and the engineering department have been helping us with. And I just want to say that they have been extremely helpful in really taking ownership of the process, both the administration and also the engineering department. And that's really what it's going to take. We've been enthusiastic volunteers, but the fact that the engineering department, the GIS department is working on this, and not just for the city of Clemson's portion, they've put a map together and are working in the central portion, university portion. So really a lot of good collaborations and work's done. But we're up to a point now where we have these maps, but the next steps specifically, we need to get the surveys, engineering work, and design work done for these phase 2 sections. So the equivalent of this in phase 1 was the city hired Pond & Associates, who's a firm out of Atlanta, engineering firm, and it was about $110,000 to do the survey work, to do engineering, actually looking at the cross sections and the topography. And that's really where the rubber meets the road on actually getting easements, actually making applications for permits to DOT, and then ultimately also being able to know what this is more realistically going to cost. Because we can do some really rough estimates. I know engineering, I always have to press, and they don't want to give an answer because they're so inaccurate sometimes to give an estimate on what would this cost. But as opposed to a $600,000 or $700,000 project like we just worked on, this would likely, if all of these together, might be more of a $1.5 to $2 million project. So if we're looking at the city portion of, even ambitiously, if we could get 50 to 60% of that to be grant funded, we're still going to look at a big portion of money that the city would need to put forward for the construction of it. So the 2 requests we're really asking for your help tonight specifically. One is to give staff and authorization to start working on the engineering, design, surveying of these phase 2. So we need allocation of money to be able to do that. So that's part 1. And then the bigger ask is, as those come online, as we start understanding what those phase 2s are going to look like, also helping us be able to get ahead of the curve with the funding from the city so that we can actually get some of these grant programs that are really exciting. So before we can go and have the confidence to apply for these grants, we have to know that that's possible. And if it's not, obviously y'all have a lot more issues you have to balance than just the Green Crescent Trail, but we really need to understand that that's possible so that we can then start shooting for some of these other sources, both grants, but also sponsorships, private sponsorships potentially from local corporations as well. So we're happy to answer any questions, but that is our request and our presentation for tonight.
Chad,
Yes.
remind me now, where does phase 2 go?
So this, phase 2 has 2 different sides, but what we're looking at, well, if we can get to one that
Yes.
is Berkeley Drive, that would be
Right.
helpful. All right, so maps are always kind of tricky you're not zoomed in to understand, but where phase 1 ends on one side is where the pedestrian bridge, which City Council also helped fund many years ago, 10 years ago now, I think. It would go down Berkeley Drive all the way down to Ashley Deering Park. That's one section. So we would connect to phase 1 in that area. And then it would continue from Ashley Deering Park over to Nettles Park. And I know, Captain, we live in that area, so we're kind of more familiar with the routes there, but it would require some private easements to do that. And we've been working initially on talking to some of the landowners to try to get those, at least just a verbal idea if that's even possible, and it's been positive so far. But until we get some of the surveys and some of the other work done that we're asking for, we couldn't actually formally get any easements to even know that that's possible. So that's one reason we're asking for this.
I wasn't sure if that was phase 2 or 3, so thank you.
Yep.
Other questions, comments? Well, Chad and Heidi, we can't thank you.
That was good. One thing that I just want to bring back up, and Andy and I have talked about this a little bit this year, is I know Andy has plans to begin the budget process a whole lot sooner this year. But one thing that I want us to look at with very critical eyes is our fund balance in particular, and where that fund balance is dedicated, because there are many projects that are in that fund balance that have been sitting there for a very long time and haven't gone anywhere. And I think this year we need to almost take a clean slate approach and think about our priorities that we began to outline last year and that we've heard from the community through our planning efforts, through what Green Crescent Trail has done, and through our other meetings and town halls and those kind of things, and see if we have an opportunity to reallocate that fund balance to things that we know are current priorities in the city, including the Green Crescent Trail, as well as, and I think I brought this up 4 or 5 meetings ago, with this year as we are moving forward, I think it is important that we find a way that we provide the funding necessary to do this initial engineering work and provide the support. Andy's also indicated that through ACOG we can get help with the grant writing for the federal program from the Department of Commerce. And those grants will pay for a little more stuff. It's better to have them shovel ready, but they, with that 80% match, I'm hopeful that there are other things that are in the plan as well that, we should be looking at as, in addition to phase 2, because this opportunity isn't going to go on forever for this level of funding. So if we can do those things and get to that point where we can provide a 0 to 20% match on that federal funding, I think we need to look hard at the possibilities to do so.
So are you, to Bob's point, asking for the staff sooner than later? I mean, what's the timeline are we talking about?
Just as an FYI, the Department of Commerce grant, which I think Lindsay actually sat in on the call as well. It's hard to tell. There were probably 500 to 600 people on this chat. It was obviously for the entire country. It's a rolling grant. It's there until the funds run out. So time is really of the essence. I mean, if we've had the pre-engineering done, and this is not my area. My area is dollars and cents, and trying to convince people that this is the best project that has ever existed, which I think it is. I mean, this is a great town. We got people who love being outside. They love to walk. They love to bike. They just need safer ways to get from here to there. So yeah, if we had the pre-engineering work done, it would certainly be easier to go ahead and write that grant to be able to give the information to ACOG or whoever is doing the grant writing. But and this is something that Bob had talked with us about a month ago before we started setting in motion being here tonight. Even if you hire a professional grant writer, it takes an enormous amount of time and effort from Andy and his staff, and from us. I mean, which is fine. We're happy to do it because it's free money in a lot of ways, especially this Commerce Department grant, which is up to 100% match. But it's a lot of work on their part, and it takes time, effort, and people, and that's just not something that we have figured out how to invent for Andy. And so we're hoping that you guys can find a way to do that.
And the first deadline on that grant is January 31st.
Oh, you could apply for it tomorrow.
You can apply for it first, but I don't think they're going to review until January 31st to start doling out money is the last that I was told.
I can look at my notes and let you know.
Yeah, and while it is a rolling grant, that money's going to go fast because
absolutely.
Everybody's looking at it. It's not going to roll for years. It's probably going to be like, hey, we got halfway through the first round of requests and all the money's gone.
Somebody asked that question,
Yeah.
and their estimate was May.
Yeah,
Is when it
so
would all be
we
gone.
need to get something in this round definitely to not miss that opportunity. So, Andy, I don't know what the steps would be to.
That's what we were
We
just.
just look through.
Nathan would be the one I point.
Nathan's already looking through it. He's getting a plan together because we have to get a certain amount of engineering done just to fill out the grant.
Yeah.
And to submit these exhibits and what we're looking at there. The other is I'm hoping to have your fund balance conversation sometime this fall.
Yeah.
So not really spring, like month or two.
Right, that's what I was gonna ask, is to make sure that we move that up as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm looking October.
Okay.
So as you're looking for this money, do we have other partners? Is Clemson University going to be a partner, or City of Central? Are you going to them? And so that, I mean, we're going to obviously be partners, but
From
are
the
those entities-
grant writing perspective, it improves your grant. And so that, I'll put you over to Chad, and speak specifically to what you're.
Well, I didn't want to confuse the issue. There's a lot of things going on. And this is one of the on the forefront, but Andy and I were both in a meeting a week ago with the university, and there's some really good collaboration possibilities. These specific routes, it's always been a process to figure out, which one of all these puzzle pieces do we put on the table first. There's some other ones that could probably warrant being moved up, particularly the ones that are closer to the university. And so the conversation Andy and I had with other university planning department partners was, could we in parallel do some studies of some of the routes that are particularly important for commuting to campus? Highway 93, College Avenue, and even Oconee County. We've been having conversations with Oconee County council members about them partnering with us as well to have more of a Oconee County, Pickens County, Anderson County. Robert and I have also talked to some Anderson County representatives. So that's a bigger potential. There's a few more ducks that need to get in a row to make all that happen, but what I would love to see is that this could grow into the beginnings of another planning process that involves university, city, 3 counties, and it's more of a regional alternative transportation, walking and biking plan that we then all go and apply for some grants. But it's just going to be a few more things to get together to make that possible.
When we had the last regional transportation study get together with all the different agencies, the one thing everyone wanted was non-vehicular transportation studies. And everyone valued that and saw that as the key. And that last meeting that we had, Chad was talking about, everyone pretty much agreed that it's too difficult to try to talk about how do we make our project hook up with yours? How do we work that out? Well, why don't we all just plan it as one big project, and then we don't have to worry about it. And we all help pay for the big design work of it, and then it's just all one fluid project we pay our proportionate share of. And that seemed to get some traction there, at least with the 3 agencies that were on that call.
And the only other thing, Fran, that I'll add, we actually positioned to Senator Alexander and Representative Carter, we talked about the regional aspect. It wasn't just about Clemson. It was about bringing in all the partners together to hear exact question. And that's the plan going forward. So, just FYI.
I guess specifically to this request tonight, there's a piece of this planning process that the city of Clemson is in the city of Clemson, and that we can move forward on some of these specific sections so that we can get some grants so we don't miss the boat. But then I think we all know that we should also in parallel be talking, and we have some meetings set up with university planning staff to actually say what sections are in your plan that we could also talk to Andy and Nathan and see which sections are in your plan so that we could try to whittle down a scope of work that we could then get a quote, say here's how much this plan would cost, and come back to you hopefully pretty soon and say here would be a joint planning effort between the university, the city, and then hopefully other partners as well.
There's also a great project coming up, I think he touched on it, South Dakota Trails Grant. The letter of intent is due October 1st, so we're going to be coming to you guys asking for a resolution committing 20% of $100,000, and that'll pay for the the Gateway Park connection of the trail. Nathan says it's about $100,000 project that fits in really well because it really ties in with the one they just paid for. So at your next meeting, I'll be asking for a resolution to support that effort.
Heidi, would you send me the RFP as well when you send it to Bob, the grant information?
Sure. Yeah, so, because they're just my sort of, typing notes or whatever, but it is really illuminating. And I appreciate Andy sharing that the RFP, that the letter of intent deadline is October the 1st, because that was kind of glaring us in the face today before we were coming here, and I failed to mention it. And I would just say that for any of these grants, like every time you write a grant, it informs the next one. So there's really no wasted effort here. And I would just suggest that if these are things that you want to go after, that we start moving in that direction, both from a financial standpoint and from a grant writing standpoint, because you could write it for the city of Clemson and expand that scope to include Clemson University or Pickens County or some of these regional transportation groups. But it does require, a good faith effort on our part to be the thought leaders on this. And I think that Andy and the City Council and the people of Clemson have shown that we are willing to lead on this, where other people find it difficult to plan and to think and to envision this, and we're making progress, but we're just at a very critical juncture right now. We appreciate your consideration to helping us move this to the next level.
Can you give us something?
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for coming in. You both did. And Chad, I just wanted to personally thank you from the city's behalf for you getting up at 7 a.m. or even earlier with your two daughters for WSBA Friday morning. So Heidi, you weren't there, but I know you were probably up at that time too. But Chad did a great job, brought us both his daughters to represent the Green Crescent Trail at WSBA article or segment that they did Friday morning. So thank you. Staff reports, Andy.
Just to let y'all know, if you weren't there, the viewing party went off very well the other night. We had a big crowd, probably had 3,500 people down there. They stayed right to the bitter end. No real issues. I have not heard from the businesses the extent to which it was beneficial to replacing a home football game. I can tell you that the crowd was far less diverse multi-generationally than I anticipated. It was all students. So moving forward, unless the merchant said it was a huge boon for us, thank you very much, I would say that we probably want to look at other types of events, unless it's a national championship or something like that. Those are just my observations from the night. But Lowell did an awesome job. He was there to the bitter end too. He might have some other stuff he wants to add to it.
I would just say the police department announced that we got next chief Kate Rose and Captain Holbrook for leading that charge.
Chief had law enforcement from all over the state up here. There was a very strong visual presence.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Any other reports? All right, we'll move into policy action agenda. Agenda item, public comments. Please dial 653-9886 and follow the instruction. 2-minute limit per speaker. The first policy action agenda item is to consider second reading of ordinance to establish a maximum speed limit for city streets. And the chief is here if you have any other questions, please. This is second reading. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve second reading ordinance to establish a maximum speed limit for city streets as presented.
Second.
Who's here? Okay, thank you. Second, any further discussion? All right, all in favor, raise your right hand. All right, it was unanimous, so we don't need to do opposed. So, policy action agenda item B is consider first reading of ordinance to amend the city code for procurement to be eligible for state and federal grants. Andy, you're on again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. This week, normally I would put this under discussion first, but there's really nothing to discuss if we want to be eligible for grants in the future. This is stuff that the state's requiring us to add to our procurement codes. We can close out the Little John Community Development Block Grant and be eligible for those types of grants in the future. Whenever we apply for these grants, we always have to abide by these procurement regulations anyway. It's just now, instead of deferring to the more strict code, it's already going to be built in to our procurement. And of course, we would be using it for our day-to-day operations as well. And you'll notice this is on a lot of cities' agendas this month.
Any questions, comments for Andy? If not, would somebody like to make a motion?
Move that we consider first reading of an ordinance to amend the city code for procurement as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just think it's a good idea.
Thank you. That's discussion. That's a comment. It's a comment. So there you go. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimous as well. Other policy items is to consider approval for suspension of open container laws within the gated area for the block event on Thomas Green Boulevard in September and October, 2 times in September, 2 times in October. And Is Lindsay here?
Lindsay's in Columbia.
I say I was getting ready.
She's in Columbia training all week. So
Andy, you just keep on stepping up.
just doing, this same thing as like downtown when we did the summer music series. That's the same thing. Just in a different spot.
Anybody have any questions, comments? If not,
This will probably be thematic for me tonight, but particularly September, can we require masks for that? It might be a different demographic at Patrick Square than downtown, age-wise and otherwise. I'm guessing if the event Saturday, there were a few masks. I wasn't there, I would guess, but
No, there were very few.
right. So given that maybe the makeup of the Patrick Square crowd will be somewhat different, can we require masks? At least for the September one, which is 2 weeks away.
it's actually less than 2 weeks.
Less than 2 weeks.
It's actually
Definitely
this,
provide them.
this Tuesday. It's a week from tonight.
Yeah, it's coming up next week.
And what we did, just to make sure you know how when we did the announcement for the downtown event, strongly encourage masks and did, which you know.
So strong encourage probably wasn't quite the bar that we needed to. But can we do that? Can we do something that at least will be beyond strong encouragement? My guess would be some of the people particularly live there in my demographic won't go if there's not a mask requirement. And if that's part of the population we want to see there, maybe we can facilitate that.
My understanding is that we're closing off public streets for this, so I definitely think that if you are anticipating an event where there might be a transmission of the virus, you could do a temporary emergency ordinance that would have required at that event, because it's certainly on streets that have been dedicated to the city. You have the right to control what happens on those streets.
Just on the street, remember, the event itself is going to be on the square, so that is not going to be on the city streets.
Well, we control that, I didn't read that real carefully, but I saw that we were closing Thomas Green Boulevard.
Yeah.
Certainly there. It's outdoors, isn't it outdoors? So that might be another consideration, but we require masks in private locations all the time, so, I mean, pharmacies, grocery stores, that kind of thing, but that's up to y'all. So the answer is yes, you could do it. I don't know whether you, I didn't get what they're doing at it, other than the drinking part. Is it like games or?
It's just like the event that was over the summer.
Similar to what we did back in May and June, Mary, and actually it was July. We extended it to July because we had a cancellation in June, and so it was outdoors, and then it was well attended, but it was not. I mean, I wouldn't say like the streets slammed, but it was.
And there were a lot of children.
There were a lot of children there. There was the
We'll
opportunity
have
for
a lot
people
of
to
kids
come.
games out there.
I saw a lot of people come and go. They would stay there, have dinner, and then leave. A lot of people didn't linger around. At least that's what I observed.
So again, I guess that's the second demographic I think we're concerned about is not just the older people, the younger people also.
An outdoor event, it's a choice to go, as all events are of that nature. I think if this, you could bring that up again under item E, or as if you really feel strongly about it, you want to propose an amendment to this now, but it's really not pertinent to considering the suspension of an open container law, as far as this item is concerned, in my opinion. But, again, choice for people to be there, outdoor event, even on the CDC guidelines, these were not when they were downtown, and I don't know that they would be any different. These were not super dense events. There was plenty of space in the downtown area for people to not only be outdoors, but to be socially distanced, so I don't think that needs to be a consideration.
I like when I get to agree with Bob, so Bob, I agree with you. But also, I would just kind of add a little side note. The Sertoma Club meeting today, Dr. Freeman spoke and kind of looked at the wastewater analysis. And a couple things stood out to me when he was talking, particularly about it as an indicator of where the virus is going within the communities where they're testing. And one thing that stood out is he said people kind of almost reach a point where they don't like good news, or they're worried about it. They don't want us to believe it. He said our wastewater tests really are good because the numbers where we are are certainly in an area to pay attention, but they haven't crossed over to that critical next level yet, and he was really reinforcing that to people. It doesn't mean we don't need, I mean, obviously the message was get vaccinated, wear your mask when appropriate, take all your precautions, but at the same time, when you look at South Carolina's numbers, obviously as a whole, not doing very well. He shared someone from Greenville. They're not as good, but and Pickens County is not great, but the Clemson community, between what the university is doing on campus and our residents, really is in a good place. I think if you couple that in with, as Bob was talking about, with the CDC recommendations, it is outdoors, you do have the opportunity to go or not go, or to remove yourself from the situation if you feel like it's becoming too crowded. I think that comes down to a choice.
So, but again, these are old issues, so we don't need to, you can always say number one, Bob, I know what you're talking about. It certainly is a choice, but I don't think we should exclude people who want to be there by that old trope, it's an excuse, but it's a choice. But we don't have to do that. You know, Pickens County numbers are awful. I checked before I came to this meeting, it's 1,600 per 100,000. The critical number is 200. So if you want to, do the battle of numbers, we can do that. If you want to do the philosophical battle, we can do that. We also, the answers. Just again, I think particularly for September, we should identify the safest route. I'd much rather make a type 1 error than a type 2 error. Type 1 being maybe masks don't work, but I'd rather risk that than saying that masks are not necessary and they really are. So I'm just suggesting that at least for the September meeting, which is a week away, that we tell people we need masks. I don't know, Bob point's right. This is only about the open container. There's no place to put that, but I don't know if that's the case.
Well, it goes back, Fran. This time, if somebody wants to make a recommendation to consider the approval, but we can discuss it like Bob was saying, item E. So further discussion at that point. But at this time, if there's no other comments, feedback, would somebody like to make a
I'll make a motion that we approve the suspension of open container laws within the gated area event for the Rock and Block events on Thomas Green Boulevard in September and October as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion at this time? All right, all in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, unanimous. I don't need to, I suppose. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Item B is consider the approval for a resolution designating a contact person for the American Rescue Plan funding. And Leslie's not here.
I told her she didn't have to be here.
So I know this is more formality, so yes,
It
if
is.
you
It's
want.
just this here, once you authorize this, it says me as the contact person. We'll send it into the state. They're going to send me basically some login information to get into the portal for the rescue fund money. Then we can start drawing down funds. This is the first step to having access to that.
Any questions, comments for Andy? If not,
So it's been released, the state has released it,
Yes, they've requested it, and they've told us that as soon as we send them this resolution, they'll send me the login information, and we've been filling out the spreadsheet for how to determine what your losses were, to determine that number, and that's the first number we need before we start really hammering down that infrastructure.
all right. Any other comments? If somebody would like to make a motion?
Consider approving a resolution designating a contact person, that being Administrator Blondeau, for the American Rescue Plan funding.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous. Again, thank you very much. All right, the next item is C, consider for approval, Andy, you're on again, an agreement between the City of Clemson and Abel Baptist Church for overflow parking for persons attending Little John Community Center.
This here isn't just for Little John, it's also for Rotary Park, right, in that area, because a couple of weeks ago, we probably could use this, the Juneteenth event that we're going to probably be doing on an annual basis. This could also come in handy there. But pretty much this agreement here says that if we're going to use it or need to overflow parking, it's Parks and Rotary Park, Parks and Rec Department's going to work with Abel on scheduling. And if Little John needs them, then they're going to have to work with the church and Little John, let them work that out together. Because the agreement's with us, we're not working that out. This here is just, we're going to have the agreement with them, Abel, just like we have with other churches in the area for similar uses.
comments, questions for Andy?
I do have a question. So if Bill John decides to use something else other than this, they don't have to use this as parking.
No, they don't have to. It's just there if they want to, or if they need it. I mean, they're going to need parking, because, I mean, I know that they have a lot of events that, you know, they don't have a lot of parking. They can anytime we have a conversation with council, cures meeting, anything like that, you're going to need to park someplace.
Yeah, but I'm just asking if they are deciding to develop their own plan, other than this plan, they would be able to do that.
Yes, yes.
Other comments, questions for Andy? If not, would somebody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the agreement between the City of Clemson and Abel Baptist Church for overflow parking for persons attending Little John Community Center and city events as presented.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, raise your right hand. So you're good. We're all, it was unanimous. Okay. All right. So I don't have to go again. Thank you. Making my job a lot easier tonight. Next is D, and Andy, you're still on for just two more, Andy. Consider an agreement with Development Strategies for the Upper College Avenue redevelopment workshops.
Todd and Shannon Quattlebaum and myself met with the DS staff, and we kind of went back to scratch and said, okay, here's what obviously everyone was expecting this outcome to be, and what this process is, and the reason we went with y'all is for this real estate expertise. And they came up with what I think is a proposal that very accurately reflected that. I feel that if at the end of this project, we're going to be very well suited to start writing code to make this vision happen and extrapolate it to other areas of the city. I think it's going to give staff the tools they need to get it done. And I think it's also going to let the public see. Sometimes it's hard to visualize when we're looking at development regs what something's going to look like. So we can include some watercolors in here that would show people with these regulations and architectural standards what something could look like in this area. Maybe pretty close to what it is. So there wouldn't be like a bait and switch feel if someone thought something in their mind that maybe wasn't accurate, that sort of a thing. So we were trying to focus not on just the process, but also on having people having confidence and faith in the result as well. So we want people to support it. So the cost is a little more than we had in the first time place, but that's because I requested that they have a lot more meetings, multiple meetings in one day. They're going to be here a lot more. There's more work involved in this. We had plenty of money budgeted this year for it, so we're still going to have money left over after this contract for the rest of the year. The other thing that Shannon and Todd did a really good job of was refining the first proposal to really keep it wrapped tight to where there are very few opportunities for scope creep to occur, and to keep it really on target. Shannon in particular was pretty hard on that, and with all their comments in there, we feel good about it. And Matt Wetley's on the phone now if y'all have any questions for development strategies.
Any comments, questions for Andy?
So I have a question, and I don't think this is for development strategies, but so my concern now becomes the timeline, because right now our sunset clause is December 20th. And according to our contract, the key milestone, the land use regulation framework, is expected to be delivered before December 20th so that staff can begin drafting updated land use regulations. If we're not getting their recommendations, and I'm not criticizing them, I'm criticizing us, until December 20th, how can we then have a sunset clause that kicks in the day we're getting recommendations to send to our planning commission for updated land use regulations? This doesn't fit with the sunset dates, because we're essentially getting, I assume, a report that will help guide what we're going to do, right, with the ordinance on the day that the ordinance expires. So either this date doesn't make sense. We're gonna have, I think, amend the date in the current ordinance so that the sunset occurs far enough after we get a report that we can actually make decisions. You know, again, I said this at the last meeting, I'm not saying this is on the same scale by any means. This is exactly the Afghan problem, where a deadline drove decisions rather than decisions driving deadlines. And if we stick with December 20th, we're not getting a report until December 20th. How do we address a plan that's supposed to be sunsetted on the 20th?
Fran, I think one of the reasons I agreed with John on that issue was, and I think it's in the ordinance, that if we do not take any other action, and so there's a phrase in that ordinance, I do not recall it off the top of my head, that was simply, if I can speak for what John was getting to, is that if we didn't do anything else, so we are still taking action. I think we do need to still do something, but it was not a sunset, do or die. It was sunset if we don't have any other movement on the project.
Well, actually, it reverts back. I mean, to me, Fran, the key point is you're driven by a deadline now, yes, but it's not an absolute. We can vote to change that.
Right.
My goal and purpose and intent with it is, as this process moves forward, and they're working with citizens, they're working with staff, we got to have a finished product on December 20th. We won't have a finished product on December 20th, but we've got a new set of rules, so if we're moving it forward, there's some indicators, there's something tangible other than let's just throw it on out. Because initially we're going to put any type of deadline in there, and that is not fair at this point. I think we need to have targets, things we're shooting for. And I believe Bob and some of his groups were working with some things we may even be able to touch tangibly before we get to that point. If I remember something more you told me correctly with some of y'all's land use stuff that was going to the planning commission. So this is going to become kind of a living document, a living ordinance as we work our way through that. So to your point, I mean, it's not going to be, so your sunset provision, this council can make a motion on that night to say, we're not at a point where it's complete yet, it's going to the planning commission, here's what's going, we're moving it forward.
But I don't,
Fran,
John
raised his hand.
The way I look at this, the 20th, when we get to that point, everybody in this community is going to have an understanding of what that's to look like. Okay? Everybody would have been through that whole process and understand it. And then from that point forward, it's just to clean up and get everything in place to go forward. Pending ordinance or whatever it takes, that's what you put in place at that point, a pending ordinance, and then finish it up in about 60 days. But by December 20th, we're all going to know what it's going to look like. The expectation for this community will be out there. This is what we're going to do. And that's why I support the 20th, and I feel like that's the way to go with it. And I know it's a deadline you don't like, but you can always go to a pending ordinance for the next 60 days. And that's conversation. We had that conversation when you were at the beach. And I know you probably missed part of it, but I know that happened.
I think first, Catherine, I'm not sure what the ordinance says, so I'd like Mary to clarify what the wiggle room is in there. But the second point is, and this is a Mary question too, if we're going to change that ordinance, and that would be a change in the ordinance, my understanding is it has to go through the public hearing process, and they do the planning commission process, and that's a 6-week, 8-week event, which means if we wait till December 20th, we're already past the deadline. Mary, you have to clarify, because I don't know if I'm correct, but if it's a true ordinance change, it goes to PC, goes to public hearing, goes to 2 readings by us. PC meets next week, the next meeting's not until October. We're talking an 6 to 8 week process, maybe more, assuming everything goes smoothly. So then we're going to bump into, if it has to go to those, that we need to start that process in September. So Mary can tell me if it has to go through ordinance, because I don't know, but it does involve changing the ordinance. But I also do want to hear, John, what we actually approved that night, because I'm not sure how much wiggle room there was in that. What Catherine, she may be right, I don't know.
All right, Fran, before we go to Mary, think about it some more, Mary. Just for John.
I just want
had
to
his
point
hand.
out one thing to Fran's point about the process. It's what John said. You can put a pending ordinance. So if you go all the way back to the moratorium, you brought that as a pending ordinance before anybody ever heard of it. So if there's things are being developed in this project, that's what would move forward. So, I mean, there's mechanisms to do things and not just do it in 60 days. You've already done it yourself.
Right, we have to have something in place, though. Anyway, Mary, the process may not be what I think, in which case it's a simpler question.
in looking at this, and that question was raised earlier, about whether you would have to go back, I do think there would need to be a public hearing, because basically you've stayed a portion or eliminated a portion from the zoning ordinance. We didn't feel that it was substantive in terms of having to go back to the planning commission. But we did feel that there had to be a public hearing and two readings.
Public hearing in 2 weeks.
Yes, sir.
So that's at least a 6-week process. So I guess, John, I see your point. I would be comfortable, though, having a deadline that we know we'll have all the information. I don't know how far we've progressed because I don't know. Maybe the people can tell us that how much is reported on the 20th. It's going to help define what we do. If it's just relatively unimportant, we go far without it. Maybe. I don't know. So I think for me, the comfort level would be that we don't wait, because now if Mary says we have to do a public hearing and then 2 readings, that has to start first November meeting, maybe last December meeting, which is 3 meetings away from today. And again, that has nothing to do with what we're asked to approve tonight. I understand that. That's a different issue.
I think if Matt, if you're comfortable, if you can hear us, would you like to just kind of give a broad brush of what you see, you envision from a time perspective based on this project schedule that you're presenting to us?
Yeah, I don't know if you all can hear me. Looks like my microphone's working. But listening in on all this, and I can say, you know, my partner Justin can speak more to the procedural elements of getting zoning approvals and those sorts of things. I can only speak to what's a reasonable time to engage the public in a process that gets meaningful input and allows time to process things and provide input, and for us to make recommendations and adapt and make changes based on what we're hearing to address needs of community members as they express them. And I think that if we get going relatively soon here, I think that, you know, December is a realistic time frame in which to you know, provide, you know, I think what we're talking about is an advisory memo, which makes the broad recommendations that enables your planning and zoning staff to write what the code that's needed while we work out the remaining details of the plan. And I think the way the process would work, we'd have that first public meeting where really we're mostly just listening. We're providing some education on and maybe some case studies and examples, and getting people thinking about what could be done here. But largely it's just listening. The second meeting, which we could do in November, we're coming back with ideas that you've got to give people something to react to, you know? So we're taking their ideas, we're putting different alternatives in front of folks and seeing kind of what sticks, what resonates with the community, and what is not resonating. And I think that with that meaningful input, we can work with staff and work toward writing that memo that, you know, kind of lays out the broad brushstrokes that the town staff or city staff can then get to work on writing that code.
So I made my thoughts on the date extremely clear. I think previously the December 20th date is particularly given the time frame of this project now, is even less likely that we will have a nearly complete land use ordinance or group of ordinances ready to go in a form that isn't going to be like our last process that we just went through, which that was floated, in November or December of last year. We started considering that in March, and we just passed it second reading a couple of meetings ago. So while we can get into pending ordinance, I want this, when we go into pending ordinance this time, I want us to have a relatively complete picture as opposed to what we had this past time. And I think we will be much closer to that. But, again, that process, even though we'll be under pending ordinance and potentially, I think it's extremely risky, that December 20th date at this point, because there isn't anything in the ordinance about if we haven't taken action. It's only we have to act to extend it is our only option there. And again, I just want to be clear and on the record again that December 20th is not the finish line. And if we do not have something in place, if 4 of us are sick that night, the meeting doesn't occur, something like that that happens, then we are back to no ordinance, wide open, pre-moratorium deal. And I think we need to have an extension based on this process, delivery date of December 20th, with those potentially the land use regulations being here a little bit early. It's going to take staff a bit of time to get them into shape in a way that they will hopefully not go through the same things we just went through in this past time. So I think we don't need to do it tonight as part of this, but we are going to need to, I think, to be fair to everybody, extend that date. I don't think we need to extend it very far, but we're going to need to extend that date and not wait until the 11th hour on December 20th to do it.
Okay. And Bob just hit on this. That's not what's on the table tonight, so I would suggest we move forward and that let staff and development strategies kind of work through that timeline at the beginning of this process. So, and I don't even know if you make that call midway through October, but let's kind of let them establish internal deadlines, then establish the frameworks, because if we're going to either move to a pending ordinance on December 20th, or if we're going to extend it because we're a month off from having something final, let's get the information in hand first. I mean, I think we're all doing a great job of speculating a bunch of what ifs, but let's kind of deal with some facts once they get in here and do a bit of work.
All right, unless there's, yep.
Yeah, I'm going to
Last comment.
disagree with John, but I don't think this goes back to the staff from back to us in mid-October. Frankly, mid-October is past the deadline of our 3 meetings. I would request, Mary, that this be an action item to revisit that. And it might be the answer is not to change the sunset. It might be to tweak the words a little bit to say if there's not significant process. I don't know what the best is. So I request that because this has nothing to do with the.
As I said, I use that as an example. I didn't say anything. I said
If
let
we could
staff
just,
work with them.
if we could just put as an action item to revisit that thing. Now, if we're going to change it, even that night, though, we need a public hearing at some point, right? Even just to change that date. We can't that night make a motion to change the date. We will decide that night whether to have a public hearing and go through that process, which would be a 6-week process. But you're right. That's nothing to do with the contract. So.
Just so you think about, I mean, if I'm counting this right, you have 7 meetings, including that December 20th meeting from tonight on.
And your public hearing can be the same night as the reading, so it's not like that's going to be 3 separate meetings.
That's up to council.
Yeah. I mean, it's saying it can be.
All right.
And we do need the public hearing for simply changing the date on the sunset.
It's because it's part of the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
The enabling
All
act,
right.
the enabling act requires any changes or amendments to the zoning ordinance to go through that process.
So, all right, so we have a plan going forward. Would somebody like to make a motion to consider the agreement at this time with development strategies?
Make a motion, we recommend approval of agreement with development strategies for the Upper College Avenue redevelopment workshop as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All right, passes unanimously. All right, the last item on policy action agenda and other policy items is consider any amendments necessary for the current mask ordinance. Andy, you're listed. This is the last time you're listed if you wanted to.
This is a placeholder that we promised we put on the agenda in case any of y'all want to make any adjustments to the agenda, just to the ordinance, just to make sure that you always have an opportunity to take swift action.
back to my theme. So I am going to make a motion or whatever that we go to a mandatory mask for all business establishments. I think that the numbers are better, John, you're right, but they're still scary as heck. I think 2 weeks might be enough to clobber this. I didn't count exactly, but there are fewer, I believe, than 20 businesses in Clemson that fit under the mask ordinance. There are 3 or 4 grocery stores, 4 or 5 pharmacies, not counting the grocery stores, and maybe 6 or 7 convenience stores. That's it. There are other places that may or may not be essential. Hotels. All right, when you get on a hotel, you get on an elevator, masks aren't required. So even the essential and non-essential, to me, is artificial. It's essential to some people, maybe non-essential. So I'm going to know the process again. And if there's not a second, that's fine. I think in good conscience, I have to do what I think is right for the city. And that is we put masks as a mandatory requirement, just like it was with the first one. I'd much rather err by saying it's a good thing to do and be wrong than err by saying we don't need to do it and be wrong. The consequences of type 2 error much, much more serious than type 1. So, Andy, I don't know if I need to make a formal motion. So I'll make a motion that we alter the mask ordinance, that all businesses in the city, masks are mandatory.
I have a motion on the table. Is there a second? There's a second at this time, but any other comments on agenda item E?
I would ask
Yes.
Mary if you
John.
would, just in light of the state Supreme Court's ruling, just kind of, I know you sent some nice email, I appreciate it, but maybe kind of give a overview of how that affects us. Our ordinance obviously is different than Columbia's. I think that was decided based purely on Columbia's case, and maybe just kind of point out some of our differences, just to kind of get that out there.
I think the key provision in the decision, I will tell you, it was kind of a confusing decision because a bunch of justices wrote their own opinions in it. But I think the key part is where the court says, we do not outright reject the possibility that a local government could impose a mask mandate without contravening the proviso. The proviso basically says only that you can't, a school district or schools cannot announce, require, or enforce ordinances with any appropriated money under the budget, 2021-22 budget. The court said, in this case, the Columbia ordinance is so different than ours because it did impose enforcement responsibilities on school principals and school administration and school staff. And knock on wood, I dodged that trap, hopefully, by making it so they don't have any responsibilities and that they can't spend any state money in enforcing it. It's all on the city. I know that some other cities have asked for copies of our ordinance so they can look at that. And I have been looking to see if maybe they can make better ones that we can steal from too. But I think the key of the proviso was don't use any state funds. City of Columbia stepped into a little bit of a trap because they required enforcement by school personnel, and that would involve state funds.
Thank you. I think Mary did a great job with ours. I think that showed through. And I don't know if y'all watched arguments before the state Supreme Court. I watched part of that one. Mary told me those lawyers were having fun. I wanted to buy both sides of beer afterwards. Yeah. I don't know how that was fun.
Go ahead.
Bob.
I wanted to ask Andy and Mary, do we need to, and I'm not going to make a motion yet, do we or should we make some official statement or position about the preschools, particularly 2, 3, and 4-year-olds, while it was in the ordinance and the CDC guidelines, you know, that young kids that can't put on a mask or take it off on their own, you know, are not required to wear a mask, and that we have put out some information to the preschools because we had a couple maybe overzealous preschool leaders who were coming down on the 2-year-olds and parents, and that was not the intention of this. So should we do anything official with,
I think the chief
put some
and his
clarification?
folks I think the chief and his folks have been handling that particular issue. Maybe Captain Colbert, the chief might be able to speak to that because I think they've been kind of It's communication. They've been working on their communication with the various locations about it.
Good evening. I think this is where our discretion comes into play. Unfortunately, our discretion also comes under fire because of some of the other locations. But specifically to the schools, we've communicated with them. We're letting them handle their population and with the trials and tribulations of dealing with children, do the best practices as best they can.
And then my second comment is that I don't know if we have an enforcement plan for our essential locations, but in the past few days, and I don't know if it seemed like it was better last week for a little while, and it's the essential locations, but I don't know if there's been, since the Columbia verdict came out, if there's been people interpreting that as our mask ordinance is no longer in effect. The last couple of days that I've been in Publix, it was abysmal, the compliance. So I think we need to have a little bit of an enforcement and plan that that this is still in effect. I actually had to go to Walmart today, and there was actually more people wearing masks in Walmart in Central, where it is not required today, as a percentage of people there than there were in Publix yesterday. So I think we need to do something.
The issues that we're having with enforcement is Publix specifically, but also Walgreens and CVS, is they're following their corporate policies and they're following their direction not to enforce it. Publix has made announcements in the store, and they do periodically go up to people and remind them that they could be cited for it. Our officers are going through those establishments and ask when they see people not wearing a mask, informing them of the ordinance and telling them to wear it. I myself have done it and watched them pull the masks out of their pockets and put them on. So they had them, they were not wearing them. It is a constant battle, and we can go in there, enforce it, issue a couple tickets, and then move on to the next store, move on to the next call, and then it gets backfilled with people walking in not wearing their mask. The signs are on the doors. Some of the establishments aren't even putting the signs on the doors that we've given them because their corporate policy is telling them not to do it. So we're going to be put in a situation that when we start issuing citations, because we haven't issued anyone a citation yet, but when we start doing that, it's going to become disingenuous at some point, because it's only going to be a matter of when we're there to issue the citation and then leave, and then nobody's following up behind it. So if that's where council wants to go with that, it's going to put us in a contentious situation, and that's what we'll have to deal with. But that's what we're dealing with right now. We're trying to get the stores to help us in encouraging people to wear their masks.
One question, Andy, has anyone checked with the corporations? Because I talked to a citizen, and they actually called Publix headquarters, their corporation, and he said that's not the information that they want their stores to be communicating, that they are supposed to comply.
They're communicating,
So,
but they're not doing anything.
But
They're also not offering masks either, because that's one of the things
but
they
they
ask.
started
Okay.
because of that call. So my question is, if we would follow, is that a possibility, just to check with the representative in this particular area about what is actually their policy? Does it trump city ordinance? Because if we have an ordinance, then they should be complying with that policy. And I think that would help the corporations say to their stores, you should be complying. So that's one of the things that I do know.
I'll add real quick, Chief, do you mind?
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. Their policy could be we don't let people of a certain color in our store. The law's going to trump that. Same with public health.
So I was at the Walmart neighborhood grocery store, at Walmart Central, last night, and they have it posted state and local mandates, face covering. They provide masks when you walk in, and they actually had somebody up front. And when I went into the Walmart neighborhood grocery store last night, almost everybody was wearing masks.
So that's what I'm saying.
So
And when we passed the ordinance, I talked to the store manager directly and asked him, how can we help you encourage people to wear them? And his answer to me was, it's at corporate. I'm waiting for corporate to get back to me. So I hadn't followed up with him since then, but that's what he did. And we got actual correspondence back from Walgreens and CVS that both said we were waiting on corporate to come back. All of their employees are wearing it. Their corporate policies, the employees are wearing it. It's to what extent they go to have their patrons wearing a mask is what is in the limbo.
I honestly,
Catherine's first.
okay, that's fine.
My fault.
I pointed over this way.
That's okay.
Yeah, I know, my fault. Catherine.
Well, that was actually, I wanted to clarify the reason I didn't vote with Fran, I didn't second it, because I've heard what you've said about enforcement. The compliance in the city is abysmal most days, but to your credit, I hear your voice in my head saying, how do we enforce it? And that's the challenge. And until we get business leaders or business owners to even come close to buying in, it's way too much of an uphill battle. And I agree with you. That was my issue: is who's going to be ticketed? Is it going to just be sheer chance that I'm in the grocery store when you're there? So that was my issue, Fran. Is I know it's supposed to be a good look, but there are consequences that I don't think would be equally distributed.
A couple of things. First of all, I shop at Publix, but I know they've got the signs on the door, the smaller signs. I think maybe Andy may have given those signs. They got a sign as they come in, the bigger sign there. And now if they've got masks, I didn't realize I hadn't been in a day or so. I mean, I don't know what else you can ask them to do. Okay, I mean, I don't think their employees are going to be in a situation where they feel comfortable walking around and in fact asking people to put the mask on. I don't know whether it's Publix or anywhere else. And I mean, they're retailers, they're in the business to make money, they're in the business to have customers in there. And I don't expect you guys to be walking around and writing tickets in there either. I mean, that's just where we are. It goes back to the same situation with people being vaccinated or not. They're going to be vaccinated if they want to or not. They're going to wear a mask if they want to or not. We can only do so much. And you can put a citywide mandate in for masks and it's not going anywhere because it can't really be enforced. So people have choices. They can wear a mask if they want to, if they feel like they need to. They can get vaccinated if they want to, if they feel like they need to, if not. And I think that's about all we can do.
So, two questions, just to be clear. So the store is not preventing us from enforcing it. They are not enforcing it, right? They're not saying to you, you cannot come in and do this. Okay?
They're not saying that.
Yeah, and obviously we've had the enforcement issue lots. Any law, any regulations enforceable, it depends how much resources you want to put into enforcing it. So we don't have officers to stand there hours and days. So, but it's not true that it's not enforceable. Anything is enforceable if you have the resources. So when you go into the store, I'll give you an example. So the first week of class, I'm driving down 93, and several students stopped for speeding. And clearly that was about a message during the first week to students saying, we are serious about doing this. So I think part of our message, John, needs to be we're serious. And that's what you said. I mean, if it's nothing more than as a policeman has the time or on his usual route, he's going to walk through Walmart or whatever and give a ticket or two, that's what it has to be. And you can't watch all the time, but I think that doesn't excuse us by saying we can't enforce it, so we're not going to. I think no one's asking you to do any more, right? But I think the message has to be, we're not enabling you're not wearing a mask. We're going to enforce it as much as possible. Speed limits. My guess is at any point in the day, more people going over the speed limit than probably under it on lots of our roads. That doesn't mean you don't enforce it when you can. You try to get a habit. And that's it. So I don't agree with you, John, that the enforcement issue negates it. I do agree that we don't have the resources to enforce it, but I think as much as we can, even if it's to continue what you're saying, I'm going to walk Publix, and I know, we all know, it depends when you go, right? 10:30 in the morning when my demographic shopping, there are more masks probably than 4:30 in the afternoon when another group is shopping. My guess is that's all over. If all we're doing is walking through each of those grocery stores twice every other hour, that doesn't mean people stop wearing masks, but I think it avoids we become enablers to not wearing a mask by not even trying to make the point. We're serious enough that at least periodically we're going to be walking through, and no one wants you to do more than that. But I don't buy the enforcement means we can't do something. It means we can't do everything, but it doesn't mean we can't be a presence when appropriate.
I would add to Mr. Fulmer, I mean, there's no law that you can enforce 100%. The group MAD estimates that before we catch a DUI, the first time that person is driven under the influence 80 to 90 times. So should we stop just because people are going to continue to drive? We can't because it endangers innocent people.
I'll just let me use a quick analogy, and it's a bad analogy, and I'll say it right off the bat, because one, we're dealing with people who are getting very sick and dying, and the other is not even close to that. But I'll use the open container ordinance as an example. It's illegal to have an open container in the city. During football games and large events, we run into people all the time that have open containers, and because it's illegal, we have the authority to go up to them and say, you can't have it, pour it out, throw it away. And most comply. Once in a while, you'll get somebody that's not going to comply or do something stupid, and then they'll wind up getting charged with it. I use this also as our enforcement policy with the mask. We go around and we enforce it by educating people and saying, you got to wear a mask. If you're not wearing a mask in here, you got to go outside or you got to get a mask before you come back in. Most everybody to this point has complied. And so that is the enforcement plan that we have put in place, and we have not issued a citation to anyone. We can debate all day long whether giving somebody a $100 fine or not is going to accomplish more compliance than not, and I think that's where we're at right now.
That's what the two things. One, unfortunately, we've had a few weeks. It might be time to start giving some tickets, and that word will get around. I think we could do a better job with signage at the stores and asking them, and having big, giant, in-your-face, that maybe we provide, in-your-face signage on a sandwich board. That's
big poster size.
well, we need to ask them very nicely to put those up and have it be very explicit. Not wearing a mask in the store puts you at risk for receiving a $100 fine. And that, those things we've had a few weeks of education, and unfortunately, that may be what needs to happen. Now, the second question I had, and I know we've talked about this a couple times, do we have the option of adding a fine for businesses who are not complying, that are on our essential list?
We can. That's what we had before, where we had the wider mask mandate, and the fine was $100 for businesses, and I think it was $25 for individuals.
If their employees were not wearing
If their employees.
masks. So if it depends on what you're asking. If you're asking for them to take a certain type of action, and if they don't, then we find that we need to know what that action would be. I think before it was just the employees were required to wear masks, and if they weren't, then they were fined $100.
I can't remember for sure.
I think that's what it was.
But that's a distinction we could make.
Yeah, I'd be careful with the business finding. I mean, I understand it for the employees because they're in the city and that's the ordinance out there, but and this kind of goes back to what Alicia was saying, some of these corporate policies. I've had the opportunity to look at some frequently asked question sheets from some of these companies, and it is pretty clear in there that, if there's an ordinance from a local municipality, you are to follow that. Conversely, there's an employee thing about what is your level, where do you come from. We do not expect you to confront people over a mask. I mean, they may say something on occasion, but to expect them to carry out true enforcement of that or suffer a fine, I mean, we saw this pretty bad towards the end of it before there was vaccines. Now that there are other options out there for people, I think you're kind of creating a no-win situation. I get it from the employee side a little bit, but as far as having the staff or Publix walking around and truly enforcing it, that's just, will be fine. I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, and I know they have been Publix has been making an announcement, and at least the very, when you get the welcome to Walgreens, you can say, welcome to Walgreens. By the way, you're supposed to be wearing a mask. It's an ordinance in the city of Clemson with a $100 fine. Not going further than that, but having them do those things and making sure the employees. I think we can do a better job with some of those.
I think the important piece when you talk about enforcement as well, when we know that there are particular businesses that are not. Because once again, I believe the explanation that the manager gave to the customer was, and then people won't come. So if we enforce this, people won't come. So it's not even about corporation, it's about people not coming in and spending money there.
But if you're not going to at least stand at the door, put the signs up, require people, you know, when they come in, give them the mask. If you're not even going to do that piece, then increase enforcement too. Because also, you don't want the police standing outside your store all the time. So that is a deterrent, it could be as well. So there are a number of ways to say, okay, you don't want to comply, then we're going to make this a hot spot. So then our office is going to always, you know, it's sort of like when we was on campus, our fraternities would be upset with us because they felt like the police were always patrolling in their particular area. But that's where a lot of our incidents occur. So that's why the police were there. So in this particular instance, you can also do that kind of enforcement. And then it's the presence. So that somebody's standing there, you know, when they walk in, you got to put the mask on. Put the mask on, and to Bob's point, if they're not going to put their mask on, at some point we got to give that $100 fine. And that is the way we get that message across. Because right now, it's, you know, I've gone into Publix, I don't know, several times. And it's just, you know, I don't care. I'm going to just walk around without my mask. So I think that's another way of enforcing it without requiring the businesses to fine the businesses. But you can make it uncomfortable. And I think that's what Fran was saying, but you can make it uncomfortable for people.
So I'm looking at this CVS policy.
Fran.
CVS policy.
Fran, I was just going to say, you know, we're going to keep the discussion. Thank you, Chief. And I think everybody's gotten a chance. You know, I'll give you one more opportunity as well. Mary, thank you for your comments. But if anybody would like to make any type of motion on the eve of this be the last comment. Frank.
No, honestly, I looked at the CVS policy, and their policy is that they no longer require masks inside stores unless it's mandated by state or local regulations. And a couple of places, it looks like, and this might be bold, that they don't require it for people who are vaccinated. They don't say how they figure that out. I think they might just trust them. So they're not saying not to do it, is what Mary said, what the chief said. They're following the local. They're not getting in the way of it. They're just not taking responsibility for it, which I think is appropriate. I don't think we'd ask them to take responsibility for it. But I think
Just to clarify, it was whether or not to post the signs at the front door, whether corporate would let them do that or not.
I think
That's what they will.
I think Alicia's right. We need to contact corporate.
So, all right, last comment.
So this is a comment that'll lead to a motion.
Okay.
If I make a motion that we require the stores to post the signage provided by the city prominently at their front door, is that something that we can put in the ordinance? All right, I'd like to make a motion that we require the stores on our essential list to post the signage that indicates that the city of Clemson has a mask ordinance for essential locations. That one in particular, you know, we can say Walgreens, whatever, pharmacies, grocery stores listed out, and failure to do so may result in a $100 fine.
Second. Okay. Further discussion? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, so we all have different masks on.
You want to come up to the podium, and then if you can, if you feel comfortable, take off your mask and state who you are. And
Hi,
there's a
my name's
sign-in
Karen.
sheet.
Hi.
Oh, it's on the podium. Okay.
So we all have different masks on, and I guess I just want to ask the question is, mine's fashionable. Yours looks like yours might be just a little bit better, but I don't wear that one in the hospital either.
Actually, I think we have.
So I'm just curious, if we're going to enforce this mask mandate, shouldn't we enforce it that every one of us has to look exactly the same with the same mask because we really believe that mask is going to work? Because the data out there is saying the masks don't work. But I'm not against it. I mean, if we are more comfortable, I'm not against this, don't get me wrong. But the data is saying that masks don't work. So we can have conversations like this all day long, but we got to start presenting data. Because that's what our decisions should be made on, not on emotion. Again, I don't have a problem with it. I can conform like everybody else, and I do. But there's no proof that my fashionable mask that I whip in and out of my pocket all day long like all the kids do is going to work. Nor is yours proven to work. So what are we really doing here? If we want to push this mandate, this mask mandate, then we need to up the money to what we really know works. And that might be full-on respirators. Let's go there. Because if we're really that so scared, let's put on the mask that we know is going to work, because these don't work. We are literally giving up our freedoms just like that. And it's really upsetting because I haven't seen any data put out here. It's just emotion. And I work in the hospital. So it's hard to sit here and listen to that, enforcing these poor police officers, dear God, to stand there and have to make statements like little innuendos. We're going to force you. We're going to pressure you. We're going to have presence, so you have to. Little by little, we're going to tighten that screw. Forget about that. Give everybody a mask that works. Don't try to do threatening little innuendos with the police there. Don't make them go in there and make people hate them. They're already being hated on. God bless them. Don't do that to them. Let's get the full-on respirators if that's what we're so afraid of. But the data does not support my fancy little mask. $5 to $25 so I can match all my outfits. And what you're all wearing too, because yours don't work. So if any of you are affected tonight, it's out there already. So let's put some data up on the walls here so people can see the truth. That's what we need to do, and that's what's very frustrating here. But please, don't do this to our law enforcement. Because I hope we have their back. We act like we have their back, but they have been suffering. So to stick them in a store and make them go out in there and give citations? Are you really willing to give up this freedom like that? I really appreciate you giving me the time. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thanks for signing in. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, I would respond. Our definition of face covering follows the CDC's August 13th, 2021 definition of what face coverings are. If that is updated, we'll certainly change that. There's also been at least 6 internationally peer-reviewed studies that show that mask mandates result in something like a 43.6% reduction in transmission. So I think there is data out there that talks about reducing that through all masks are not perfect. We are following the recommendations of Dr. Swan, and the city is making masks available. Are they KN95 masks?
I can provide everyone in this room a KN95 mask before they leave tonight.
And that's based on the recommendation of our medical advisor.
Thank you, Mary. Any other, all right, so any motion at this time? The motion's on the, oh, the motion, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Say that
See?
again.
So,
The motion is that we require the stores on our essential list to prominently display the signage that we're going to provide that says that essential locations, including pharmacies, grocery stores, convenience stores, there's a mask ordinance, and not complying with that mask ordinance will result in a $100 fine.
And the fine is to the store owner?
And the fine in not complying with that will be to the store owner, manager, corporation. And I say we just set it at $100. The same thing as individual.
so just to clarify, what we put out and what the police department was so gracious to do and what's been posted I've seen, what's the difference?
We've given people a big.
They're not. In most cases,
They're like this size. We haven't done on a special printer we have downstairs. We had a stack that a few hundred made. The problem is they're just deciding not to put them up. Yeah.
I've seen up to one or two, but it's not widespread. And the signs that the stores have themselves don't mention the city mandate or a fine or those kind of things. So I wanted to have our signs that are very clear about the mandate and the potential fine to the individual, and that we let the stores know that there will also be a fine for not displaying those signs prominently at their entrances.
And
We will provide the signs.
And then just to make sure, again, the wording on the signs right now, because I've seen them, it's maybe I'm.
I don't know if it has the fine amount on it, but it says there's required fine. I don't remember the exact wording.
See, I'm comfortable with what we currently have, if we're already
It was
providing.
clear.
So I guess that's what I guess.
They're not
They're not
displaying
putting it
them
up.
prominently at any of the stores. It's not a Walgreens entrance, it's not a Publix entrance.
we're
It's
just
not a
giving them
convenience stores
sign.
entrance. This requires them to display them prominently in their entrance.
The same signs that we've already provided. Okay.
Or I would like it to include the $100 fine on those signs.
We probably need to go make another round.
Okay.
And that's kind of, where do you consider prominent? Because in a
Entrance.
business that's got multiple signs and their own stuff up front, it can kind of get lost in what I might think of as prominent on the door. I mean,
Why don't we
let's
put
just have
it,
them display it, I guess is what I'm saying. I think maybe we're reaching a little far.
Display at the entrance.
Display it prominently at the entrance, so
At
it's,
every entrance
it's
to the
hard to
public.
miss.
Display it at the
And
entrance.
most signs are this big on the door, or it's over to the left, that if you're walking in that store, you are going to see that sign. And so that's the not convoluted motion with the explanation there, but that the signs clearly say it's a City of Clemson mandate, essential locations, $100 fine for individuals. Add the fine to the stores who do not display those prominently at their entrance. I think that's it.
So you need a second before we can discuss that.
Catherine.
Seconded it.
It's already been seconded. We're in discussion time.
So can we be equally effective without a $100 fine threat? I'm asking that honestly, I don't know.
With the, you mean the $100 fine to the businesses?
I didn't hear your question,
If the $100 fine really is necessary to get this done.
That's kind of what I want. I mean, I just think if we could be with
I'm fine, if we want to take the $100 fine to the businesses off and try it, and if we have which I don't think we will, if we have wide scale, we're just not doing that, then we can add it back.
I would
So
recommend
it's the
taking-
same sign, I'm sorry, same wording that we already have. We're just gonna do another visit and make sure they're prominently displayed when you walk in.
Well,
That's
maybe-
if I
The
clarify.
$100 fine to the individual is still needs to go on the sign to individuals not complying with the mask ordinance.
So what currently is?
So what it currently
We're not
is, but that's
defining
not on the
business.
current signs that they have.
But what this does is, it gives us the authority to say that we have to put that sign.
Yes, yeah.
There's no corporate, there's no, I forgot.
Right.
You have to.
Yeah, you've got to do it. And then in 2 weeks, if we're still, hopefully we're out of this soon and numbers have come back down. But if we're still in it in 2 weeks, if the businesses have said no, we'll say, all right, we're going to add a fine to this. And then I think that'll get them to take it seriously if the police go by every other day and give them $100 ticket.
And I still think, I'm sorry, we should make sure we call the corporate and make them aware that this is what we're doing.
So I want to clarify then, the motion is just that they display the sign prominently,
At
and that
the
we
entrance.
include on there that the individual, the non-compliant individual, will have the fine as already stated out there.
Individuals not complying with
But nothing to the
$100
business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Subject to $100 fine.
Basically just saying, please put your sign.
What does the sign say right now?
That's,
Andy's got it right
yeah,
here.
it says face mask required to enter this location. To view the full ordinance, visit the city website or hit this QR code.
How big is the sign?
It's like, it's about that tall.
Why can't we just ask that, like, where you just
we've
prominently
tried that.
display the sign as it's prepared currently?
Let it, visible.
I mean, because they asked that already.
But I mean, how many of them are actually displaying it prominently?
It's not hard for us to produce these. We just do them on the computer. We print them off on our big printer downstairs. And if we were going to change this ordinance, we wouldn't rely on the one we previously gave you. We'd probably want to go around and make an extra trip just to have a point of contact.
So there's no cost to them. This is just a little bit more steel in the requirement that you need to do it, and if you don't want to do it, that's not an option. So all it does, I think, is just reinforces that you're doing it, right? And there's no please do it. Right. So I think it makes sense. It doesn't So if they're gonna put it up anyway, I think you're really where they are, there's no cost to them, there's no issue. But and it should be an entrance is,
Any other comment? All right, if not, all in favor, raise your right hand. So, okay. Thank you for doing that. Thank you, Chief, for the comments. Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, council reports, comments, new business. I'll do mine I'll do mine very quickly. If you did get a chance, which none of us did because we're here, WYFF did a report on Clemson tonight at 7 o'clock. Hopefully you can go online and see it. That's what I'm going to rely on. It did focus on Little John Community Center at 12 Mile Beach, as well as our trails that we do a collaborative effort with the town central. So hopefully it should be a link on WYFF, Downtown Destination Chronicle report. So I just got a text. I know periodically you just popped in and said that you represented Clemson very well. So WYFF, thank you. And WSBA, like I said earlier, thank you for representing Clemson as well. They did a showcase Friday morning. We had numerous people there bright and early, numerous organizations, Clemson Community Care, Community Foundation, you name it. Our chief, fire chief was there, which was great. Our police chief was kind of there. I saw him there. And a lot of us were there very early, but that was nice of WSBA to also showcase our community and our city. So just FYI, there's a lot of good positive things with our community, and it was nice to share the positive message of those attributes. So that was it.
Just quickly, so the next conversation is with council is September 23rd, Thursday. 2 people want to join us. The last one was excellent. The attendance wasn't as high, but Andy's already taken action. One person wanted a caution, children playing sign in your neighborhood. Someone else had an issue with that stop sign at the SO Club in 93. Apparently the sight line is awful there, and I think that's already been dealt with. Someone came to talk about the asked 2-year-olds. I thought not necessarily agreed, but very satisfied with what we did. But anyway, it was great. Everyone was there to acknowledge it was really good. So next one's on the 23rd. We have 2 volunteers. And I think we want to talk about maybe a different location. Maybe if we're moving around, someone suggested maybe doing it at Nettles Park, perhaps, during soccer practice, so people can come. So if you want to think of some other ways to do this, but Andy gets on these things within 48 hours, and it's, people say we need this, and Andy's out doing this. I hope people understand if they come, action very quickly occurs because of that. Andy just gets it done. Literally the next day he's out getting it.
They're not asking for much.
Yeah, and most of it just, we need a sign, we need a move, we need to pick up some trash.
Just need to be aware.
Just to be aware, yeah. And so I think if people want to do that, but if you have any ideas of alternate locations, someone suggested coffee shop, ice cream store, just maybe.
I like that. The Neville's Park, I think, is a very good idea during a time when, parents are there with
Yeah,
kids.
so we might want to keep it 6:30 just because that's awareness. But anyway, so let me know, but if you want to join us on the 23rd, and actually if no one does, that's fine too, as long as I'm there and Andy's there, but it helps if we
So,
know.
Fran, I'll have 2 things. One, we posted it today on the city, an update on conversation, so just from the city. So thank you, Lowell. Look over there. And Sarah, there's 2 of us that have not been there yet. If you, I'm not going to call out names, but I know all of us participated in the first and second. If the 2 that haven't on the third, you have first rights to go to this one. If not, I'll join in. So I'll leave it up to the 2 that have not participated yet.
Yeah,
So,
we love the option. And even if you want to sponsor one in your neighborhood, maybe that's really good. So we can come to John's house if you want to advertise for your neighborhood or somewhere else.
John's
You don't have to go anywhere.
Let's go trample his grass.
Welcome to the John.
Play off my grass.
so reach out to Fran. So thank you, Fran.
Just one update. It's not city council related, but we do have Clemson United for Racial Equity Cure, and the meeting was scheduled for September 9th, but we extended it. It's actually going to be, we rescheduled for September 30th because of the numbers, the number of cases in COVID. So it will be at Little John Community Center, hopefully. So we'll it's a moving date just in case we have to change it again. But right now, it's scheduled for September 30th.
What time?
At 6:30.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
And I want to keep it, or begin to move it forward now that we have passed the citywide standard 25-mile-an-hour speed limit to go through the process to consider looking at potentially having lower speed limits in residential neighborhoods where people are walking and to help make those safer. There's some good data out there about lower speed limits in neighborhood as low as 15 to 20 miles per hour, and a campaign that we could put forward to make our residential streets safer for pedestrians.
Bob, if we go below 25, you don't just slow your jogging down.
I wish I could jog. I walk with Fran now.
But I know we all saw this in Andy's letter to us, but I think we should mention also the easement into Patrick Square from Nettles Park. I think that is a couple of important things connecting the business district there to events in Nettles, and also as the Green Crescent Trail grows, that becomes a link also in there, more akin to the swamp rabbit type stuff of a business component. So I think that just to get out, I don't know if it's been reported yet or not, but I know I've seen the executed easement.
It's in our hands.
All right, so that's been a long time coming.
That's a big deal.
Yep.
And
So
very
we'll make
good
sure
of
it's
them
out there.
to do that.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, thank y'all very much. If not,
I should make a motion to adjourn.
okay. All right, got a motion second. Any further